Good evening, everyone. We're going to get started here. Great dialogue, great networking. My name is Eric Phillips. I'm the Economic Development Director for Union County and Marysville. I've been here for 23 years, and we have a great community, and thank you for taking time on what a beautiful day today to talk about growth and prosperity and where we go as a community. There's been a lot of questions about growth and where we go and how we work together as we go forward. And tonight is a session where we want to make it more interactive. So there'll be questions asked, there'll be some polling, there'll be some other things going on. So you're going to be a very active part of tonight's speaker series. This is our first event this year. We planned 4, more to come on the other 3. But last year we had 10, so we've reduced those to 4, but we want dialogue and we want communication with everyone here tonight to talk about the future of our community. It's all important because we all live or we work here. And again, thank you for your time tonight. What I'd like to first do is introduce one of our county commissioners, actually president of the board, Steve Robinson, to say a few words.
I'd just like to welcome everyone. Thank you for your time and the willingness to participate in conversations about the future of our community. Union County, we are part of the fastest growing region in Ohio and one of the fastest growing counties in the state. And there are only 12 counties that are actually experiencing significant growth in Ohio. When you really think about that, out of the 88, we're very fortunate to be in that spot. Every community has a unique set of challenges and opportunities. The purpose of the event is to create a dialogue so we can work together and move forward together. We have an opportunity to manage growth together, ensuring that we continue to enrich the lives of our citizens, protect our tax base, and create a future that allows our children to remain prosperous in our county. So I would just like to thank you all for being here, and I'm proud of the turnout. So, Eric?
Thank you, Steve, for your leadership and for what the county does to support the community. Good news for you, you don't listen to me all night. That's the great news. We'd like to introduce Jamie Greene from Planning Next, who is a consulting firm, has done a lot of work in our community, comprehensive planning, other types of planning documents as well. And Marie Keister with Murphy Epson. She does a lot of work from a marketing perspective in the region, has done work for the Beta District, the 33 Smart Mobility Corridor. But I'm going to turn it over to them to basically begin tonight and our discussion. So again, thank you all for coming, and Jamie, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you for all coming out on such a gorgeous night in Central Ohio. You know, just from last night, we don't get those every day. As Eric said, I have had the good fortune of doing different planning-related activities in and around Union County. I run a practice that's based here in Central Ohio, and about half of our work takes place outside the state of Ohio, where we're actually working in 8 different states right now. So I think part of, when you're listening to me and the things that we're framed up for you, we do that with a fairly large, picture of how growth, development, quality of place, how things like transportation, economics, land use sort of work together. We have been working quite a bit in Central Ohio. Fairfield County on the other side of the region just adopted their long-range plan, and we led that. We've been leading 15 jurisdictions in Licking County on the western side in response to the impacts of Intel for them. We're leading the comprehensive plan for Knox County. So we have a good regional perspective. And then Marie and I, among other collaborations, are working on the ODOT's Strategic Transportation and Development Analysis, which is looking at all 88 counties and how transportation priorities might be made in the future in the state. And for the first time that anyone knows, ODOT is actually looking at the development. That's the D in the STDA. Sometimes we have to remind them there is a D in STDA. But one of our tasks was to look across the state of Ohio and look at the 88 counties and who has a plan, a contemporary plan in Ohio. And if you see this map, that's another presentation, you would probably be surprised who does not have plans. And I think one of the important aspects of this ODOT study is to, when they're making decisions about where to make investments, is to determine who's ready. Who's ready for this kind of investment, that they can manage it and leverage it for better outcomes for the state. Anyway, that is just a way of telling you the kind of things that Marie and I sort of look at when we're not here with you, that we think informs what we're doing here with you. So tonight we've got an agenda here that has us sort of just framing up some of the trends, and the commissioner mentioned a number of those things about growth. We want to share some of those from some folks in the office. I'm guessing some of this is like, this, you could probably do this part, but we need to understand what our trends are. We're really clear that the trends don't have to be your destiny, though. The reason that you do plans is to put policies in place that if there are trends that you like, you can make sure that those stay on the right track. If there are things happening that aren't in your vision for where you might want to be, then you put policies in place to bend the arc of some of those trends. So I want to talk a little bit about the trends, but also then want to share with you a survey that went out a few weeks ago, and we got over 350 members of the community responded to those questions. How many of you actually know what I'm talking about and responded to the survey? Excellent. So not everybody, but a good number of you. So one of the things that we're sharing, tonight is what you said. That survey closed on Friday afternoon, so there's not been a lot of time, to look at it, but we have looked at it and analyzed it. We're going to share that with you, and then we want to know how you're feeling about what you came here with and what you've learned tonight, and we're going to do some polling if you'd like to use your smartphone so that on this given night in Union County, you might understand what a group of people who care about the future of this place had to say together. So you're not leaving here tonight with a mystery about, I wonder if people are thinking what I was thinking or not. So that's our parts of the agenda this evening. And then at the end, we'll just open it up. It's our intentions that this, we'd be wrapped up close to 7:30, but we'll stay here and take questions for this. This is being recorded, so at the end, if you ask a question, it'll be recorded. If you, at a later date, want to go back and relive this, that'd be great. You'll have the chance to do that as well. But I first want to make sure that we're all on the same page about why we're here together tonight. And this is the first chance to check this. Could you advance that, Andrew? So go ahead one more time. So our understanding about why we're here, in part what this is about, is trying to create this greater understanding of both the opportunities and the challenges with growth that are happening in this region, in your community in particular, and learn about community sentiments about that. So in terms of the next piece here, our general understanding, go ahead and roll the rest of these out. Our understanding is that, Marie Andrews with me tonight, is that you have an attractive community, right? And so people want to be here. So it's kind of like this, this sort of, you create sort of these outcomes that maybe are unintentional. Maybe you work and you try to create this place and you'd like to stay the way it is. But to the extent that you make this a high quality place to live for you and others want to be here. So that there's part of this built into it. You're going to grow. There's a lot of upward pressure in that. You live in a region, as we're going to talk about in a minute. A lot of people want to be in this region. But the good news is that it doesn't have to just be happenstance, what happens here, whenever you grow and however you grow. That you have tools, local governments have tools to help manage where growth goes and the character of that growth goes. So that's the good news, no matter where you are, is that you have that. And I think the last point here is that we think that in making good public policies for any communities, it requires a number of important ingredients, beginning with being open mind. So for coming here tonight, I don't know what sort of frame of mind you came here tonight in, But it would be great if tonight, like wherever you are, just have an open mind about what you might hear. You may come up with the same sort of sentiments that you brought into the meeting, maybe not. But you'll never know if we don't do that. I think there's a place in all this work for understanding, where you are and what your options. So technical research is a critical part of thinking about the future, and you've done some of that here. We also think that inclusive engagement, so the different perspectives, the values, and what's the insights that you might have by virtue of living and working here, contribute to a process. And then really being thoughtful about what the consequences are in your community, intended and unintended consequences. I'll give you an example. Some of you are probably familiar with Centerville. It's south of Dayton in Montgomery County. A number of years ago, we were helping them on a comprehensive plan, and one of the things that they were trying to understand is why were their demographics shifting? Why were they becoming an older community faster than the trends would suggest just by virtue of aging? And so we started looking around, and this probably will sound obvious to you when I say this, but in the 5 to 7 years before they recognized this phenomenon, they had built the best senior facilities in the region and had the best programming in the region for seniors. So they induced a market unintentionally in that work. Now, they're not against seniors. We don't want that. But they were trying to figure out what was shaping their demographics. And so the unintended and the intended consequences of choices is really important to what we do. So, as I said, this is our agenda, is, talking about the trends, kind of just some high-level did you know things. We want to share with you what we think we learned in the survey, but you're going to help us make sure we understood that. And then we're going to do this look at the future. What does it look like? And so we've got a series of questions. Some of them are open-ended, some of them are multiple choice, but just trying to get a sense of where this group tonight who cared enough to be here, what they had to say to us. And then talking a little bit about how the insights will be used. One of the reasons that this part of the speaker series is organized the way it is tonight is the programmers, Eric and others, try to anticipate what might be on the minds of the community. So they ask speakers to come in here and share. But we're asking you tonight, one of our first questions is, if you're going to continue to be in conversations and be thoughtful about the future of the communities of Union County, what do you need to know more about? So that is one of the questions. So I'm giving you a little bit head start on answering that one. So the next area here is about, did you know? And I'm not sure I'm operating anything. I think, Andrew, you're doing it. Okay, good. So I will put this down and just call in the back. So we're going to share some growth statistics here and talk about, the point that you can quantify, certain things in your community, and that's important, but the qualifications and the quality of the input is important to us as well. So as I mentioned earlier, when we think about the trends, like these do not have to be your destiny. This is the whole point of having of convenings like we're having here tonight. And as I mentioned, I think that this fueling, if you think of it, you do well, people want to be here, whether it's senior facilities or other amenities. So go to the next one, Andrew. So on the left-hand side here, I believe the commissioner mentioned this, that Columbus is the 14th largest city in the country, right? And so for many of us who actually live here, it's not always obvious that we're that large. The other part, and some of you have heard these statistics maybe from other speakers, but this region is expected to grow significantly, especially compared to the rest of the Midwest and compared even to Ohio. Eric had shared with us today some data from the Ohio Department of Development that identified between now and 2050 that the state of Ohio is projected to lose 6% of the population in the state. That's over 600,000 people. That's also while this region and the few counties that are growing are actually growing. So imagine what the state would look like without Central Ohio. I heard somebody say a couple years back that if not for Central Ohio, Ohio would be Michigan. And I know some of you don't like that comparison, Eric. But in terms of population loss, it would be actually more significant than what you see. So for somebody who just spent the day driving into the middle of Indiana and back, not every place is growing in the Midwest. So next slide. Oh, I'm sorry. I got ahead of you here. So one of the things that you probably heard recently here is that the county, in terms of growth, has been identified as the fastest growing. That's not an accident. There's not anything that just causes people to be here. They have motivations to be here in this community. In terms of the growth in the county, there's an expectation of growth of in this same time period to 2050 of a significant amount as well. And then the Builders Industry Association has also been looking at the other dimension of growth, which is not just like the head count, but also what does it mean in terms of housing. And so, using, a fairly average housing occupancy and housing size, you get these kinds of numbers in terms of the amount of units that would be built here to accommodate what is expected to be the growth. So these things, this pressure and these projections are real, and really it's up to you and the leaders here to figure out what to do. Okay, Andrew, next. So we there's this larger framework that you exist in, this region that has, by all accounts, growing. But within like the sub-region, this may be obvious to you for anybody who drives up and down 33 with any regularity, that in the sub-region, what's happening in Plain City, which is down here at the bottom, that village is really, really under a lot of pressure, and some of them are embracing the growth, but that's big. And then what's happening around the 42, 33 interchange, potential development there as well, is also not insignificant. And then, further down the road in 33. So this corridor, in terms of, the overall region, and all of these jurisdictions are all feeling some of the same things that you're feeling here as well. So all these jurisdictions have their ability under Ohio Revised Code to make their own plans. And there is great collaboration in the sub-region, but there's also probably areas where collaboration could be even better, and that's in everyone's interest. And I mentioned Licking County, that we actually are trying to bring 15 jurisdictions in a 264 square mile area, half of Union County, bring together, because many of them have recognized that they're more likely to realize their individual potential if they're working together better than they have been historically. So, and next slide, Andrew. So in terms of Marysville, again, a strong growth curve, not like super aggressive. I think it's, what we see is a fairly good, steady way to grow a community in a way that you can manage the fiscal needs and the fiscal opportunities. Now, what somebody says, good, steady, for others may be, like too much, or for others may not be enough. The projections in the 2018 comprehensive plan actually show the population growing by a significant amount. And you can read the numbers there yourself, but that's what it projects. Again, that doesn't mean it will be, but that's what, as responsible community leaders, you have to be thinking about. We typically take the attitude in communities that you need to sort of, map out what you think is likely to happen and be ready. So if you think about land use, like being ready with where you want to prioritize growth to happen. And if you have an idea about the character and quality, if it comes faster, you know what you want. If it comes slower, you know what you want. So having a good policy in here and monitoring the growth changes so you can manage that is really important. One of the important things to note here about, and this is not unusual for communities, is that there's always some amount of development in the pipeline. People have, they're in the process already. And there are a lot of them here both in the pipeline that both include like pending and available to be developed. So, right now, based on the units and the type of units, there's something in the order of a little over 5,000 that could be accommodated with things that are already in progress, right? So for those of you who, and I'm not suggesting anybody here says like enough is enough, you're still going to get this additional growth. To me, the real question is like how and where do we want to manage the growth? It's okay, Andrew? So we did this survey. Quite a bit of you did this survey here. And what I would want to do is give you like our initial sort of reactions to what we think you were telling us. I want you to think about how you're interpreting some of this. We have a comment form that's coming with the survey that you'll have a chance to give us some reactions both to that high-level trend piece, but also this. So what did we learn? So the first part I want you to know, who did we hear from? So there were 352 participants that took the time to go online and do this. 62% of those who responded identified being in Marysville. 32% identified participating in the speaker series at some point. And then this is the age distribution that we have in these different cohorts. And one thing you might want to note is that these are 10-year cohorts, except when we get to the 45, and then that's a 20-year, and then a 20-year before. So if we split out the 45 to 64, it'd probably be flatter. But we also want to look alike, and again, want to be really clear. This is a qualitative research. A self-selected group of you decided to participate. Nobody should walk out of here and say, that this is like a quantitative, analytical research. It's not. A self-selected group. It's qualitative research. With 352, we certainly had to get beyond whatever usual suspects exist in your community. We've got a good here, and got a good age distribution. So, Andrew, could you hit it again? So, this is a comparison, and we can flip back and forth, but let's just pick, like, for the 35 to 44-year-olds, in terms of who participated with us, about 16% were in that age category. When you look at what the U.S. Census says about what's the percentage of that age group in the county, for a self-selected sampling, like, that's pretty strong. So pick wherever you belong, but like 45 to 64, it's 28% in the census, 26.5 here. So I don't know that I've ever seen a self-selected alignment on some of these brackets that we have right here. We'll never promise to do that again. But so this actually looks at tenure in the community. Like we ask how long, so if you're looking at, when you see the results and you want to know like, well, did these people just show up or did these people live here all their lives? Like what does that look like? So you can see right now that there's I don't know what explains the wave. Maybe somebody knows what the wave is here, but there's this, in the last 5 to 9 years, 16% of you are really in that group. But when you get out to that 20 to 30, there's another bump there. But you can see again, we have I think a really nice distribution of people giving us input in a self-selected way that represent, good amounts, almost 10% in every one of these tenure categories. Andrew, we ask you like what you were living, what sort of your living unit was, and 90% of you were solidly in the single family. That may not be a surprise given what you actually have here in terms of product. This is largely a single family housing type. We ask you like what employment was, and again, if you look on the left-hand side of the screen, that over a third of you identified some sort of business, professional services, financial consulting, insurance kind of things. But then if you go around agriculture, construction, technology, education, again, a self-selected sort of participation, is a pretty good representation around what we have. And then we also wanted to know, Marysville is the county seat. You'd naturally want to understand that breakdown. And so 62% of you said that you live inside the corporate limits. And so we trust that you know where you live. So we asked if you had, those survey respondents, how many of you had participated in one of those speaker series before. And so, about 2/3 had not, which to me is in some ways good. I don't know how Eric feels, but some ways good that people who are relatively fresh to this speaker series actually took the time to participate in this. So here we go in terms of the first question, if you recall, was, what do you like about recent development in the community and why? So many of you thankfully took the time to answer the why, because it's just not enough to know if you're supportive or not supportive. But we did organize the comments based on whether the sentiments were positive or had a negative connotation to it. So you can see these are in order of frequency here. I will tell you that in some of the negative comments, many of them were comments about, unless growth can be, timed so it's with infrastructure or it produces a net fiscal benefit, like, I'd be concerned about that. So it wasn't just like, we don't like it because we don't like it. It was we're concerned about it because of how it might be managed. Does that make sense in terms of like qualifying the answers? So many of those answers in these categories that may not be like positively oriented are really opportunities, I think, for solutions as you think about how this community grows and manages in the future. So this gives you, just sort of 352 people who told us how they felt about this. So the next question was, we asked you about the best examples, recent development. And this was probably, I don't know, you tell me, probably felt like a little bit harder because, there's a whole universe out there of things that you see and encounter. But many of you took the time and identified examples. Some of these are specific. Some of them, like the mixed-use developments, represent not a specific, but like a concept. But we did get development projects. We did get businesses. And we did get people identifying some other places that they had been that they saw. Again, if this is all that we get from it, it's probably not that helpful. That's where the why behind these was really important. So in some of these, on the whys, people thought that some of them addressed the housing, better than others. Some of them had what they thought stronger appearances or walkability, like when people identified maybe in the Bridge Park, that there were certain attributes of that were important to them. But in addition to the specifics, we themed the why part for you. And the why part, why certain places were identified, had to do with how infrastructure was handled in these particular developments, how the uses were mixed, that how green space was a part of it. So we do have for you and whoever's going to work from here on this some insight about why certain things were identified. So the next question 3 was, what observations do you have about recent development in the community? And you were able to select all that apply here. So you could have, these were multiple choice, so you could have selected all of them, you could have selected one of them, you could have selected none. So, at 27% of the responses were really about the rate of growth. Might be a little bit too fast. The appearance is unattractive. The location, may not be appropriate where it is actually positioned. Some of you, your observation was that the appearance was attractive. So between the unattractive and attractive, that's not a statistically significant difference here. I think you'd call that at a draw. About 10% of you felt like the growth rate was just about right. And then there has to be 6 of you out there who said that it's too slow. But one of the things that we have found, and I don't know if this is your sentiment, is that we work in a lot of communities where there's some strong sentiments about growth and the rate of growth. And this is happening in Licking County and Fairfield as well. When you dig into it, and when you dig into some of your responses, it's not this general notion always about the magnitude of growth. It's actually all the attributes of growth. If we could deliver better development, better product, people are less offended by that. The reality is, and I've said this before, and I was with you last year, some of you who came, is that, people really feel stronger than ever, I think, about having strong quality of place. And we've spent the last 5 or 6 decades in this country, not just in Ohio, creating places that people have no emotional affection for. And they never will. We just don't, they're just homogenized the environment. So many communities are trying to find ways to really be authentic and true to themselves. So anyway, the next question was about question 5. Should the community have a full range of housing choices to accommodate the various life stages and preferences? Not everybody answered this question, there's 321, but most of you did. Over 225, over 2/3 said that yes, we should have a full range of housing choices. In a lot of communities, when your lifestyle changes and you need to move up or move down in a product, many times it means moving out. And you lose your social connections, you lose your familiarity, you lose your social capital of people who have grown to love and contribute your place. So that's what many of you told us, is you wanted those opportunities. Affordability was mentioned a lot, and diversity, but the different life stages. But this is clearly a really important issue about how do we address housing in the future. And in Fairfield, as a follow-up to the plan, because at a comprehensive plan level, the housing choices were important to them, but they realized that that's something they needed to dig into even deeper. So they're getting ready to commission a housing study to answer some of these questions. How do we deal with affordability? How do we deal with the ability to move up and down? How do we actually, in new development, and this may sound like crazy talk, but how do we, in the same neighborhood, offer different housing choices? If you think about right outside the door here, as this part of Union County was developed, you have different housing products all in an easily walkable range. So if you wanted to, if your lifestyle changed and you were on one block, you wouldn't have to even leave the block maybe to find another product in that regard. So housing clearly is important to you. The next one, Andrew. So this is related to the why questions, for those people who disagreed, which was a small number, right, of the total, why would they not be supportive of a full range of housing choices? So there were concerns that some of these housing choices, could have negative impacts. They're concerned about maintaining the current character. So there's a lot that's being read into what different housing choices mean. So there's some associations here that don't necessarily bear out in fact in many communities. Some people are opposed to high density housing, but there are certainly people who that's the choice they want to make. Again, to me, it's if you could talk about the quality and character of the housing and not so much how dense it was. In Upper Arlington, some of you are probably familiar with Upper Arlington, that a number of years ago when we were working on their plan, we never used the word density. We used quality design, and we talked about the fiscal impacts of development. They were landlocked, had no Class A office space at the time. They had lost the inheritance tax. Fiscally, that community was not in a good position. But when people understood that you can manage the design quality, and you may have different opinions. It's a subjective thing, but Lane Avenue is a result of that community taking deliberate steps that created more density, but was done in a way that was acceptable to a community that I characterize having as their most cherished value, maintaining the status quo. But they increased the intensity, the allowable intensity of their 7 non-residential areas by a factor of 3. And as far as I know, no one died in that process. That was supposed to be funny, but it wasn't that funny, apparently. So this is a question about what do you think about future development providing a mix of housing and commercial choices in proximity to each other, in the same neighborhood? Can you imagine that? You only have that example right out here. We've not really done much of this. We've done a great job of segregating and separating uses. And it means that for virtually everything that you might want to do in your life, you have to take a special car trip to do it. But, like testing an idea here, can you imagine what that is? And so what I really liked about the responses to this is that a third of you said you were curious about this. Like you weren't going to say no way, never. You weren't going to say I love it, but you're saying, look, I'm curious enough. And that's what I mean by the open mind. You don't really know what this concept means, but you're not willing and ready to shut it down either. But then there was a quarter of you that didn't have some sort of attitude about you want to see this pursued. You'd like to see what it would look like if we could create places where you could, live, shop, get your basic goods addressed, maybe in a walkable range. And then there's about a 1/5 that felt like this is not an idea that we could support. Okay. So we ask regarding development, what is your vision for the future of this community? What would it look like? And so you can do the math here, not, probably a little around half maybe responded to this question, but you can see this notion about small town feel was part of that response. Like that is important to you. And then it dropped off about related to growth and development. Again, you probably are all recognizing there's another level of detail in all of your comments to really understand this. But these are the things, some concerns in crowding. When you get down, further, of the 352, statistically, some of these are quite small in terms of the responses, but they're still really important. So there's a question that we're going to address here in a minute about a small town, having you help us understand what you mean by that. But there are clearly things from a policy standpoint that any community can do that can either strengthen that or bust that mood in a really, really big way. All right, Andrew? So we ask you to, to share with us because I'm a firm believer, like for me, and I think this applies to everyone, like you only know what you know. And so we thought that if you had seen certain things that you thought would be important or good examples, we wanted to do that. And then we gave some hint about why. So these are specific responses that many of you gave us and kind of the major theme about that as well. I don't know who's been to Carmel, but I was in Indiana for most of the day, and that is a benchmark in many ways about how communities get robust things done. It's quite different than what you have here, but they have made some really important choices about quality of place and invested in that, or at least leveraged debt to get it done. So anyway, these are important things that you shared with us. So the next one, these themes about good examples, and we can correlate this to the specific places that you identified where you thought somebody was doing a good part about transportation. The recreation entertainment spaces and green spaces in park go back to examples like Carmel, Indiana there. But again, I don't know if you were getting tired on me or what, but toward the end of this survey, not as many of you are jumping in here. So these numbers go down. Okay, Andrew. So I think that, some of the things that we think we learned here is that when you think about development, the specifics around the attributes about where it's located, how does it look, what's the form of the neighborhood, what's the association relative to infrastructure. Like there's all these things that many of you think about when you think about development. So making the vision for this place requires unpacking those items. Housing, the ability for more affordability and to have choices was clearly a major theme here. And then uptown mixed use ideas as well. Like this can be an example for you in many ways if that's the kind of environment you want to sort of facilitate. And that's not, either or, because your downtown is in large part what makes you authentic, and I'm guessing it's tied back to your strong sentiments about small town character. Okay, So we're getting ready to move into hearing from you a little bit about this work. So how many of you have used your smartphone for some polling? Okay, so more than half of you. So we are going to ask you some questions. You're going to give your responses. We'll give you time to do that. Not a lot of time. I'll give you a countdown. And then we'll close the polling on each of these questions, and then you can all see what folks have had to say. We have, for those of you who don't have a smartphone, don't want to use a smartphone, we do have paper copies, and so we're going to pass those out. I need you to promise me, though, you will not read ahead. It's all there. Don't read ahead. You'll see on this form a place to identify whether you're doing the polling on your phone or doing everything on that piece of paper. So make sure you check that box accordingly on there. One of the things that the paper allows us to get from you that we can't do with the polling very easily is for you to tell us why. If you give us an answer to something, that's great, but we really want to have some additional insight about why you chose a particular answer. So that's what the paper's for, if you are able and willing to do that. Okay, I got a couple warm-up. These are not as consequential maybe as the other questions. So the warm-up questions. Okay, so how did you hear about tonight's event? Was it email, social media, newspaper article, newsletter, word of mouth, or some other way? So you can select all these that apply. So you can see if you can see in the bottom corner, it says 39 of you have responded so far. So one of the things we're going to do here early on is figure out just how long do we got to wait for everyone. So we're up to 46. So Andrew, we're getting the results. So out of the 53, and again, these don't necessarily have to add up because you can choose more than one, but the vast majority of you heard about this through email, and then word of mouth and social media were comparable. For somebody who chose some other way, would you mind what was that other way? Yes, sir.
Diana Allen told me that I needed to be here.
Yeah, yes.
I was wondering to be here.
That is amazing. Where's Diana Allen?
Right here.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. So this next question on these speakers events, how many of those have you attended? Is it 4 or more, 3, 2, 1, or none? You only get one chance here. So we got a hardcore group here on the 4 or more. There should be some. Great. And so there's a group of you tonight that have taken a risk for the first time and coming out to do something like this with us. All right, good. Okay, so now these questions are more important to us. So we're going to introduce these, give you a chance to respond. Same thing here. So this first question is, in deciding to attend this event, what is the one word that describes your frame of mind? One word. Your phone will blow up if you put in more than one word. I love this as a curious crowd. So you've probably seen this Wordle before. The size is proportionate to the responses. So, curious, open, interested. There's skeptical up there. I see that. I think that can be healthy. But appreciate you being skeptical and being here anyway. Knowledge, so you came here to learn. Uh-oh. Somebody was not only optimistic and skeptical, but they're not good instruction followers. So I know I'm joking a little bit, but there's got to be room for that. But I do see this word up here, overwhelmed, and growth and development is complex. I think that's a completely reasonable kind of sentiment to have with the level of complexity and the pressure and not really knowing what the future holds. Anyway, thank you for that. Okay, the next one. So I want you to think about the physical environment. And, identify here, you got to type this in again. What do you treasure most about this community? And it's not the people. That's usually like an important thing. I like most people, but I think we want the physical environment. When you think about walking around here, driving around here, biking around in here, what do you see that you really treasure the most? So these are the responses that you put in here. They're not grouped or themed, but you can begin to see what other folks in the room, had to say. So 5 minutes, to get to places, quaintness and charm, clean, the uptown, walkability, the character of place, the sense that there's an increase in vibrancy to the community, rural and suburban characteristics. So I'm going to assume here that you're talking about like the patterns development, that there is a distinction. In some places, these things are pretty blurred in what is urban, what is suburban, what is rural. Connectedness, you treasure the preservation of the sort of the historic buildings and assets you have. The feeling of close-knit, the maturity of the trees. Property maintenance is here. A couple more historic preservation, historic structures. The architecture, which may be related to that. Schools, neighborhood schools, uptown, parks, a couple for uptown. So, anything surprising? I'm opening up to you already. Anything surprising to you?
Mora.
Pardon me?
Mora.
More? Yeah. Mora. Oh, Dora. Yeah. Oh, God, I'm sorry. No one told me about the inside joke. Yeah, it's recording.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm Donald, which is the president of City Council. So for me, none of this is surprising to me, what we're hearing. I think sometimes in the walls of our structures, we kind of become numb to the community and what the community wants, and we become tunnel visioned as a government of how we should develop. But the community, this is not surprising what the community wants. People want a community that is unique, diverse, that protects its small town charm, and we just have to figure out when we're developing new developments, how are we going to cater to the rural character, the friendly lifestyle, the street trees, well-designed, better parks, and all those things. So
you're saying so the question was, is anything missing? So you're saying nothing's missing. It's just that this seems consistent, and so maybe, and from your perspective, the focus really ought to be on the how-to, like how we get on with this. Anything else missing? Great. Okay, so Andrew, next question here. Question 3. So it is impossible to read on the bottom of this screen. So I'm wondering how we're going to solve. So if you have the paper.
I think they need the code again.
We need the code again, the passcode. Oh, God bless you.
And what did you need?
I was going to ask, so you put the, what's positive. Is there going to be a point in here where we can say what's negative in the community too? I mean, if we're looking at everything, I want to see a survey that's not skewed towards one way or the other.
Well, we don't either. That's why. That's why.
Negative, but I don't want to see anything that's skewed. Like, are we going to be able to put down our concerns?
Well, we're going to find out here.
Okay, I was just
but,
asking.
But I'd hope that you would trust us enough based on the way we reported the survey of 352 that was not at all like a cheerleading for the status quo. Well, you told us what you were opposed to or things that were negative, and we shared them completely with you.
I'm just asking. I'm the troublemaker in the room. I'll tell you.
All right.
No,
well,
I just want to make sure that, like I said, I want to see the whole thing. That's what I want to see.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I have anything negative because even if I do or don't, I just want to make
yeah.
sure we're seeing the whole thing.
No, so, no, I appreciate that. And I think that through the 352 responses, we got a full range of sentiments. And we've shared those openly and transparently. We've got a series of questions here that we're trying to build a little bit more. And one of the things that we know clearly about communities that do well, it's those that have folks that have an emotional attachment to place. And so we get to that by trying to understand what you treasure. And the question was regarding where and how we should grow. What do you need to know more about, right, in order to have these conversations and think more productively, to think about the implementation? What do you need to know more about? And this is the question that, as Eric and others think about what will the future speaker series focus on, gives him some insight about this group in the room tonight, what's important to them. So you can pick 3 on this list. It's not all of them. Transportation mobility, housing choice, growth management, natural resource management, intergovernmental collaboration, infrastructure planning, technology integration, character of place, the aesthetics, resiliency, public health, school impacts, and then if none of those, then you can put the other in there, but we'd like you to write down what the other is if you actually use that. Now you can see the results, but you need to know what it is. So the one at 21% is infrastructure planning. So that is a top 3 item, followed by like a 3-way tie between economic development, growth management, and school impacts. And then it really, drops off pretty good there, with the 9% there being housing choice, followed by the 7 and the 2 6s, which are transportation, intergovernmental collaboration, and character of place. So again, if you're able to actually share why you picked those, then it'll be helpful to us. But otherwise, this is, I think, some good insight about infrastructure planning. I don't know how you promote that, Marie, but that's not always a sexy topic. But it's important to you, so we'll be addressing that. All right, so the next one. Other than people, what physical attributes create small town feel? Some of you already alluded to that in another question, but when you think about the sentiments around small town feel, small town character, what is it in the physical environment that helps create that? And you have choices here about authentic local retail choices, the historic architecture, walkability, multi-generational neighborhoods, small-scale streets, house characteristics. What is it about the house that might give you a feel of being in a small town? Yes, Steve?
Why do you exclude people? My way of thinking, it's people that create the small town.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to assume that too. And what I want to know is, from a public policy standpoint, what you might be able to do through zoning, through planning, that could help shape that place for people.
The comment was, why didn't you include people? Because people are so important.
Yeah. I think that's why you're doing all of this, is to make this a place for people. But I get that. But what we're trying to figure, from a public policy standpoint about growth and development, what can we shape? And there may be other parts, and if you really feel strong, like this is not helpful to me, and you want to put other for people, you can do that. But we're trying to think about is, from a public policy standpoint, what might we be able to affect that would help reinforce this? Okay? So there's 48. So there's a couple here that pop up. The one at 24% is walkability. That is an important part of small town physical attributes. The authentic, retail, the authenticity, I guess it applies probably more to retail choices, but that helps reinforce what you have. That's followed closely by the historic architecture and house characteristics. A couple more have just come in now. There's a tie for third there. Followed by multi-generational neighborhoods and the streets. And, if I were filling this out in your context, I probably would be all the above for me. There are all these things that contribute in some way to the kind of community you have. When I mentioned that there are characteristics, some of you are probably familiar with Cary, North Carolina. In 1970, there were 14,000 people there. There's 180,000 there now. small town character for them in the 1980s was something that was really important as they were growing. Um, they started building the infrastructure, like 6-lane roads. That was not contributing to small town. It was taking care of traffic, but it was actually doing it in a way that was no longer there. Now, Cary took extreme measures about this notion about small town feel, and they legally changed their name to the town of Cary. That's how important it was. I'm not recommending that to anybody, but they did that. It didn't help. 180,000 people, it's really hard to have small town character. But here you go. All right, so the next one here. So I'd like you to think about, maybe it's for you, maybe it's for your children, maybe it's for people who aren't here, but are there the kind of jobs or kind of opportunities that you think are missing from this community? So the types that are missing, you can read them as well as I can. I see some tech here, child care professionals, more references to tech. A lot of nuns, corporate. Crafts, handyman, contractors. More Delta pilots, I'm all for that. I appreciate the fact that some of you made qualitative remarks. It wasn't just like a job type, but like this one in the lower left-hand corner. But for you, it wasn't like the types of jobs. It was really, it wasn't like job type, but it was like a quality of the jobs. Yes, ma'am.
I feel that we need places where our teens can work and also teens are gathering.
Yeah.
So like, they do that at the pool and everything, but like a putt-putt golf place or something, places where the teenagers have opportunity to go and work, but then also have places to go and gather in those environments.
Yeah. And did you write that down, ma'am? Okay, great. All right, so it's a good mix. Eric, you know what to do now.
One more comment over here. I really appreciate this forum very much. Thank you so much, and I thank you for the elected officials for reaching out to the community. I would say adamantly, it is not the job of the government to force employment options. That is something government can grow when it becomes profitable, but government centralized planning just doesn't work very well.
Interesting. I've wasted my whole professional life. All right. So, next question. Again, this is the last three. How would you describe the relationship between growth? When I say growth up here, I'm referring to like land consumption, population and job growth, and a healthy community. What is that relationship that resonates most with you? So there are three options on here. Well, actually four with other. But you can look at it on your paper, look at it on your phone. You might be able to zoom in on these, since there's fewer. But one of them is like your attitude about, the relationship is that, sustaining current growth, the current growth rate is essential to the long-term health. Like whatever in your head is the perception of how we're growing, is that we need to sustain that. The second one is that, moderate growth, relative to what you perceive, is acceptable. And it allows us, as we grow, to hedge against inflation, to deal with other upward pressures on costs. So some moderate growth. And then there's an option here that says, like, we have all we need for the foreseeable future. Like, we don't need any more growth. And then there's another category if those aren't enough. But it's sustaining current growth, a moderate growth, or so half of you chose the moderate piece. That is, moderate growth is acceptable. Like we don't expect to stay right where we are. This is not an option that was given to you, but there are a lot of places that they're in a downward trend, and that could be something, but I don't know who wants that. But fairly closely behind that, with nearly 40%, was how the rate that we're growing right now again, related to population, jobs, land consumption, that sustaining this seems to be like the relationship. Okay? 2 more. Oh, maybe 3, I'm sorry. I would support more growth if, and there are like 7 of these up here plus other, I'd support more growth if it was, and you can, this isn't all, these are all qualifiers, so all these that apply, but if it's sensitive to natural resources, if it produced a net positive fiscal benefit to local government, it produced a living wage, it contributed to the pride of the community, it happened concurrent with the provision of infrastructure, it was of a high aesthetic quality, like the building design and placement, and then, you know, there's an opportunity to say, like, I don't support any more growth or other here. So there's a strong infrastructure sentiment here because the question about what you'd like to learn more about was infrastructure was there. So this idea here that that 20% of all the responses was about you'd be more supportive of growth if there was a concurrency issue going on. Sometimes, I'm not making excuses, but sometimes there's challenges about when when you can get the infrastructure and when development approvals happen. But you've made this clear that that's important to you. The living wage issue, like you want quality jobs, it sounds like. And then the high aesthetic value, the quality of place component. And then it drops off here to the left about the natural resources and net positive fiscal benefit to local government. So this is insightful. And again, the poll's nice. The wide part is even better for us. All right, so let's go here. How important is it that the community has the option to live in a neighborhood with these choices? How important? So you're scaling this on a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is just not important to you, and 5 is where it is. So these are happening in real time. So one person selected 5 on all of this scale. So you're going to see this happen in real time about the relative importance. All right, so this is going to stay open until we're done here. But if the scale is 1 to 5, 3 is in the middle. So very strongly about multiple housing choices to live within a neighborhood. That's pretty clear and consistent with some of the other things that you told us. The retail piece, 3.5, so that's a little bit more than the middle of the road. And then I think the opportunity to live and work in walking, biking distance is kind of middle of the road. But those are all, if they're not positive, they're not negative here either. So there's no miss. Yes, ma'am. You're going to wait? All right. We're going to wait too.
I'm sure you don't have it set up for this presentation right now, but do we have the option to see these responses in a histogram to see if it's average because we have all 5s and 1s or because everyone put 3?
Oh, you can see this. I don't know if we can do it right here on the spot for you, but maybe when we're done with the question we can do that. But you're right. There's a difference between whether it's polar things or even distribution. Okay. So there is one last question in this exercise here, and that is really asking you, you came here tonight, I hope with the intention of doing something to make your community better, whether it's just learning or understanding, but you came here with that intention. So I'm just curious about what might you do leaving here tonight? Is it attending additional forums, these speaker series? Is it attending public meetings? If there's a public meeting going on around a comprehensive plan or an area plan or a transportation plan, would you attend, those kind of planning project-specific meetings? Are you going to stay up to date by reading things that, are related to this? Would you be interested in volunteering for a community committee opportunity if that were to present itself? But where do you see yourself in helping make the community better? So, about a little over a quarter would participate on a project-specific public meeting, and about the same amount would attend future educational forums. I'd really be curious about the why part of this, and is that the same group, right? Is that the same group that is choosing to be active and the other 3/4 of you are not choosing anything or choosing to do something else here? But I would encourage all of you, like, in my experience, the best communities are those that have like an active community involvement, where the values are infused with the good technical research in the community, and there's an ability to really talk about the consequences of actions that are there. So what we'd like to do now is thank you. But we do have a little bit, I mentioned like 7:30. We will stay here a little bit longer, but are there questions or comments about what you heard here tonight, what you think goes on in the future? Yes, sir, there in the middle.
I probably have a little more insight on a county-wide basis than a lot of folks in here. However, I'm one of the bigger infrastructure guys. You had alluded or spoke directly to the fact that you've been working with ODOT.
Huh?
And I think most people would recognize that one of the, and we'll call it infrastructure, including roads, utilities and such, but one of the detriments has been to rapid growth is the logistics of getting from point A to point B. And as you know, ODOT doesn't work in a 12-month time frame, okay? It works in a 10 or 20-year time frame. How would you engage this community, knowing that we're going to grow, to start laying out definitive plans with ODOT to provide the transportation network necessary to not only ensure seamless growth, but accessibility to the major population centers that are going to be served?
Great. And so my colleague is eager to answer this question. So yeah, go ahead, Marie.
So a few years ago, ODOT initiated its first corridor planning study in about 20 years. And they chose this 33 corridor as the focus of that effort. And I don't recall if you participated. Okay. So there are long time frames with those things, but coming out of that was a series of plans and priorities. And the goal there was to help the locals identify what their priorities were, and then what could ODOT do to support that. We see on 33, they're making a pretty big investment right now, and some interchange improvements as well. But the key to that is to keep going to the table and keep talking to them and sharing that your needs change, and so the plans have to change too. I know that doesn't sound very concrete or actionable, but
we're also learning through this process, the strategic transportation development analysis, that, as I mentioned, ODOT is, trying to look now more closely at the relationship between development and the consequences of their investments, what they look like. I don't know if ODOT lets you do this, but I mentioned the town of Cary. At some point in their growth, the NCDOT could not keep up with them, so they loaned the Department of Transportation money so they could get their projects going.
Okay.
No,
yeah, along with that ODOT comment, I've lived in probably 8 different cities and states across
eight different cities?
Cities and states across the country. Growing up in Pittsburgh,
Yeah.
in Minneapolis, and Chicago a couple times. In any case, one of the things I see very deficient here, not just in Central Ohio, but Ohio in general, is the lack of peripheral feeder roads. And if you take a look at Union County, we essentially have 33.
Yeah.
And we have industrial parkway.
Yeah.
Okay, we have nothing on the other side that provides a peripheral network of feeders for communities, for traffic. So is that part of ODOT's plan, or is it simply 33? Because without the acquisition of right-of-ways and other things, it's never going to happen.
Yeah. So the simple answer is that study's not done yet, but go ahead, Marie.
well, in a lot of those roads, ODOT is not responsible for. It's responsible for the interstates and the U.S. and the state routes, but not the arterials and so forth. I want to give it over to Terry here. Everybody's got a few words.
No, excellent points made by roadway work that's necessitated by the growth that's occurring. And of course, ODOT, as you said, right now is spending about $5 million along the city of Marysville stretch on exitways and roadway improvements. And that is a point of emphasis of ODOT's because they see, you know, obviously what's happening here. And so I think they'll continue to put attention into some of this. One of our, whether it's a fault, that people see to our growth that's very appealing to developers is the planning and preparation that went into water and sewer infrastructure. And Jamie, you probably see it in some of the areas you work in over in Licking County. What Marysville did 20 plus years ago with Union County, and when Union County designated Marysville as its utility provider, Marysville invested millions of dollars in sewer and water infrastructure that you don't typically see in different parts of the Columbus region.
Oh, for sure.
So what's happened is, whether it's you know, I think in the long run it's definitely going to be a benefit, but the growth is occurring in areas where the utility infrastructure is ready.
Ready is a great point, Terry, because what we think is kind of emerging out of this ODOT study, again, it's, you know, they are a big, this is being recorded. I mean, they're a big, complex organization that's done business a certain way for a long time. They don't change easily. But there are conversations that I think are having there that haven't happened about what they're doing and how it relates to development. Typically, they'd get justification based on volume needs, and they would support a project like this. Like, is it advancing? And so I think the reason that we're on the team and we're looking at things we're looking at is because they want to know if communities are ready. Like, do they have a plan in place about what are going to be the consequences if we do this? Are we going to stimulate something that's positive, or are we going to stimulate something that's not so positive? You know, one thing in our conversations for the first time, I don't know, maybe it's happened before, but ODOT's talking about quality of place. Why on earth are they talking about quality of place? Because they've recognized it's important. It's not in the core of their mission as they've understood it for decades. Any other comments or questions? Well, I would say something on Eric. I think you could thank them all, but I appreciate coming in here. I know that you could have chosen to do a number of things this evening, but you chose to be here. What I'd like to think is that for whatever jurisdictions are represented here tonight, that they learned something that might be able to be useful to them. And at a minimum, I think, Eric, you got some good input about what your future speaker series, things that it should address. Infrastructure being one of those. There was a hand up in the yes.
I'm probably going to say a dirty word, solar panels.
Okay.
You know,
Thank you very much tonight.
When those started coming in, obviously the acreage that they're taking up could affect whatever long-term plans that a community or a county would plan. Is there any plans on behalf of the federal government? And I say that, you know, because it seems like that's, you know, solar panels, wind turbines, whatever. Is there any plan for the federal government to work with local government on what they have on the books and what they have to do?
I'm not aware of that. Maybe Eric has a comment. I'm not aware of that. I know that, you know, the way that this country and these states are set up is that land use is a local government authority, right? Like, they're not going to do this. So, like, what is permitted by land use type is determined by local governments, right? So the federal government would not say, do this here for these uses. So I don't have the direct answer to your question. I know that it's happening. I mean, you've probably read what's happening in Madison County in a really big way. 3 weeks ago in Knox County, there was a public meeting about that very topic. over 300 people showed up and signed up to speak that night. At 11:30, they did this and said, we'll reconvene in 2 weeks. So we know it's a really important fundamental land use issue, principally, but also an energy, quality of life, visual character place issue as well.
It's best for me not to add anything on the solar farms, but we have a ton, 10,000 acres in the northern part of the county. A lot of concerns, no question. So,
Thank
Jamie,
you very much.
let's give Jamie and Maria a round of applause. And Andrew did a great job as well. He actually did an internship here with the city of Marysville as well. So, Andrew, thank you for coming back and being part of this as well. So, next steps, we will have a report that we will share as part of this follow-up, so everyone knows exactly what we're discussing. And again, your input is valuable. My title is economic development. Of course, my job is to promote growth and development, no question about it. But it's also important to know what you feel and the direction you want to go, so we can manage our growth together. And so there's no perfect answer going forward, and that's why we get input. And we're going to take this input, and hopefully will be the basis of how we're going to work together as we grow together in the future. But again, thank you all. Have a wonderful night. Thank you so much for coming. Have a good night.